Facility in Parwan, Bagram, Afghanistan. Now, the facility is going to include detainee housing capability for approximately 2,000 detainees, as well as guard towers, administrative facility and vehicle personnel access control gates, security surveillance, and restricted access systems. The estimated cost of this project, well, you know, just $25 to $100 million. And the contract is to be awarded on or around December 30th of 2011. So for starters, what does that say about our war in Afghanistan winding down? Didn't we just see the president use $1 trillion in war savings in the accounting for his deficit reduction plan yesterday? And who are we going to be holding in this new facility? Here to discuss it with me is Christopher Swift, fellow at the Center for National Security Law at the University of Virginia School of Law. Christopher, thanks so much for being here tonight.
Good to be back.
Okay, so we already have a prison at Bagram. I'm confused. Why do we need another detention facility that can hold 2,000 more people?
Well, one of the things that we're sort of forgetting is that we're having a war in Afghanistan. And in war, people are killed.
I haven't forgotten that.
Or they're captured.
Not at all.
Right. And when people are captured, you need a place to put them. So the fact that we're building a new detention facility in Bagram either means we need the facility or we anticipate that we're going to need the facility. It wouldn't surprise me if we have a backlog or if we have some concerns about whether the Afghans are adequately providing security for their facilities. But it definitely says that the U.S. footprint in Afghanistan, especially in southern Afghanistan and the Pashtun regions, is going to continue on for quite some time.
Okay, so none of that winding down exactly.
Well,
I mean, we're going to see troops start to leave. You could say, right? We're going to have 70,000 troops only. What a small, tiny number left after the fall of 2012. But now we're going to have more prisons. But, you know, the problem here is you're saying there's a war going on. There needs to be a place to house certain prisoners. Right. But, you know, if you look at human rights organizations, Human Rights Watch, Human Rights First, they'll tell you that there is no such thing as due process here, that these people don't have, you know, any kind of adequate representation, no lawyers. So who are we to just keep holding thousands of people? Well,
there's a problem here, and it's a legal problem. When someone is detained and they're on U.S. territory, the Supreme Court has ruled that if you're in U.S. territory or in an area of effective U.S. control, like Guantanamo Bay, you have a right to what's called habeas corpus. You can challenge the government's right to hold you or challenge the evidence against you that justifies your being held. In the case of a war zone, in the case of individuals who are picked up on the field of battle, the law that applies is international law, and the international law of armed conflict says you can hold those people indefinitely until conflict ceases. So you have two different sets of legal standards, and one of the arguments you're seeing from groups like Human Rights First and Human Rights Watch, which is a reasonable argument, is that there should be at least some due process or some review for people who get picked up who aren't actually combatants. And, you know, we've seen this in Guantanamo, we've seen it in Bagram, we've seen it in other places. But that's the tension, the legal tension here between wartime law governed by international law and U.S. due process law governed by a tradition of habeas corpus that goes back well over 1,000 years.
Yeah, those are a lot of really important questions that need to be brought up. And at the same time, you know, at some point we have to hand over control of the prisons to the Afghans, the same way that we did in Iraq, and we've seen how well that has worked out, as there have still been reports of rampant torture and, you know, abuse of detainees going on at those prisons. So when does that actually happen here?
When does the handover of control
of the prisons?
You know,
is there any planned date?
It's hard to say because we haven't decided when we're leaving Afghanistan. We've decided that we're going to have a smaller footprint in Afghanistan. We've decided we're going to spend less money in Afghanistan. We've decided we're going to focus less on village-by-village counterinsurgency operations in Afghanistan and emphasize more targeted counterterrorism operations. But at no point has anybody in the administration or Congress or any of the relevant branches of government said this is the date by which there will be no more U.S. presence in Afghanistan.
But supposedly, okay, so if we're going to, you know, we can say that U.S. officials, military officials, NATO officials, Afghani officials have said that maybe by 2014 we should hand over control so that at least the Afghan security forces can be in charge of security for the most part.
It's unclear whether this facility, which is just announced, whether this facility is something that would be handed over to the Afghan National Army or the Afghan National Police, or whether it's something that would remain under U.S. or ISAF command. My guess is, given that it's at Bagram, again, this is just pure speculation on my part, is that this is probably a facility for high-value prisoners, foreign fighters, people that are being detained, moving across the border from Pakistan or coming down from Central Asia, or people who are part of the Haqqani network or other high-value individuals. The average Taliban fighter is, by and large, being held by the Afghan National Police and by the Afghan Justice Ministry in Afghan prisons. And as we've seen in recent months, those Afghan prisons aren't very secure and aren't doing a very good job of keeping people who have been captured.
Yeah, we saw a recent jailbreak. I forget how many months ago, but we reported
That's right.
on
The
that
Taliban
here.
basically tunneled under the prison, which is an amazing feat not only of engineering but also of well, they managed to do it under everybody's nose. So.
Well, but I think, you know, that's the other thing that a lot of Americans have to remember, too, is that there are more prisons. It's not just at Bagram. There are many prisons
That's right.
Across Afghanistan, and maybe they don't know it or they don't realize it, but it's got to be frustrating,
and they're not all
too.
U.S. They're all not all U.S. prisons. Remember, the Afghan government has its own prisons. They have their own laws. They have their own rules about what happens in their country vis-a-vis the people, the insurgency there. So when we're capturing and killing people on the battlefield, the United States has one set of laws. Afghanistan has another set of laws that reflect their culture and reflect their legislative priorities.
But at the same time, it's still our money, and you know, it's sad that these days we live in such a world where $25 to $100 million, that doesn't even sound like a lot anymore, right? That's just become a drop in the bucket. But at the same time, we are being told here at home that we have to cut, that taxes have to be raised, and I think that, you know, that should be worrisome for Americans.
Let's not forget that part of the price tag in that $25 million to $100 million is the cost of getting stuff into Afghanistan, which is relatively easy when you're talking about Bagram Air Force Base, but it's also the cost of providing security for the facility and for the people who were building the facility at the time. And that cost of providing security has gone up exponentially since I was last in Afghanistan several years ago. And from what I understand, it's going to continue to go up as the Taliban continues to reconstitute itself, continues to gain interior bases of operations, and continues to take the battle against us and their adversaries in the northern part of the country.
As it gets more violent, now that we're finally reaching the 10-year mark here in this war, and let's not forget, of course, that the former president of Afghanistan was assassinated today, so we're just seeing the violence pick up. Christopher, thanks so much for joining us today.
Good to see you.
Yet another bomb blasts through the concrete of Kabul. This time the target, one of the country's most important political figures. Burhanuddin Rabbani, former president of Afghanistan, and the man who had the job of negotiating an end to the war that's lasted almost a fight against the Soviet Union. That led him to the Afghan presidency, but he refused to leave when his term was up, eventually forced to a small corner of the country when the Taliban took over. The very people he was negotiating with responsible for his murder. Peace talks have proved largely unsuccessful so far. It may be impossible to restart them after this.
The mission that he had undertaken was vital, Mr. President, for the Afghan people and for the security of our country and for peace in our country. We will miss him very, very much. I don't think, Mr. President, that we can fill his place easily.
Hamid Karzai quickly left the United Nations to return to his country amid fresh evidence that the Taliban can attack freely and at will. James Bays, Al Jazeera.